My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasangran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Janis. Today I'm going to continue on Mahan's chapter 24. He has two parts. One is vision of God and vision and dreams, right? So let me cover the first part, which is vision of God. This is very interesting. You see that I put this picture, which I found was very interesting, that normally we have our vision that is, tied to whatever we see in this material world. And we see that, what we see is all matter and energy and the things in our lives and so on. And including even God has been, materialized or, in the object form. And this is what God is. And so here we covered many satsangs that to discover the truth or discover God, one needs to focus the vision inwards. And this picture of a boy looking through the telescope tells us something very important, which is if we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, for what is unseen is eternal. So here we're going to walk through with you on what is this that we are seeing and how do we see it, and what are the apparatus that we have to use to see the unseen or cognize the uncognizable. So, and when one does that, you see that one gets a very interesting and very new experience. So in this chapter, Swamiji speaks about the vision of God. And one of the things that we see in this Mahan scripture and also in most of the other scriptures is that a noisy mind will not be able to cognize the most subtlest of the subtlest God in its, formless, dimensionless, timeless, all those things that characterizes the divinity. We will not be able to do that with a very noisy mind. And we see that when the mind is quiet, what does that mean? When the mind has absence of material thoughts, experiences, ideas, and all those things, we start getting glimpses of itself. That means who the mind is truly is. And when the mind does that, the mind then sees that all the thoughts that are generated from this material world, which gives it a material personality, and the mind tends to get kind of immersed in that material personality, and the object personality, ultimately it forgets or loses its true identity, that the subject, which is formless and dimensionless. So we've seen this in many of the earlier satsangs, which shows that you need to have a quiet mind. How do we nurture a quiet mind, right? Far less experienced itself. And in this, it says that when we have a quiet mind, a sense of quietude or silence, we get glimpses of that self. And in this next few satsangs, I'll talk about what is that glimpses of that self means. And one acquires that God realization experience. Again, I need to explain what that God realization experience is. And you see that when we define what God is, universal, formless, dimensionless, we say that the mind can experience God, which means that it has to experience the qualities and the characteristics of God. And Mahan and other great saints say that you can only experience that when the mind is quiet. The big challenge most people have is how do we attain that quietude, right? And we have already covered that, but I'll recap how we do this. So to be able to experience God in its entirety and fullness, one will need to learn to make that mind quiet. right? Otherwise, a small blemish of materiality, a small perturbation will distort this, substratum, this God substratum or the self substratum. So in this, Mahan talks about, how do one get this God vision or vision of God? And he always says, he says, focus on that inner vibration. So then he goes on to define in this chapter, why do we get dreams? And he said, thought caused dreams, you see, and we need to understand this. Most human beings are preoccupied with thoughts, either place or person or event, and all that are stored in the memory bank, right? And what is really interesting is that even in sleep, sometimes these thoughts come up and they flare up as dreams. So thoughts actually causes dream. We don't say we don't, many of us would not say, or it doesn't make sense to say that we dream of nothing. When we say we dream of nothing means we are truly in the state of that absolute. But most people say, I dream about this and that, and a person, a time, all those things. So it's all generated by the thoughts. So the type of dreams that one get is also based on the thoughts that one generates. So here we see that thoughts are the reason why we have all the dreams. And Swamiji goes on to explain, some people have this, worry about devils and all demons. And again, he says that it is because of fear. When we do not master fear, we see that all these thoughts, kind of funny thoughts that appear, sometimes it's not there. It is not, but one starts seeing all the demons starting to appear, all the negative things happening. And the fear reinforces this. A fear causes, parts of our brain to react, and it manifests and starts deepening it. So sometimes people see all kinds of things, and the mind actually reinforces that. So the same thing we see in the context of devotion. When we become too devoted, when our faith and devotion is so extreme, that you see that parts of our brain also is reinforced, and it gives us flashes, glimpses of that deity or God and all those things. So people start getting vision of God. So again, we see this in all, many saints and sages have gone through this. They have seen vision of God, God speaking to them, God giving them commandments. And you see that most of them have been intensifying the devotions, particular deity or God, and you see that it starts manifesting within oneself. Right? So this is how the mind operates, right? So Mahan is walking through this process. But if all these causes disappear, that means that if the fear is lost, if we overcome fear, and our devotion is not to anything external, even that disappears. Swamiji says, and the knowledge becomes more clearer. When one is fixated on something, it is difficult to separate between what is real and unreal, and why a phenomena is starting to happen, or why you're experiencing a particular phenomena. So what he says is that if we don't focus on getting so caught up with fear or too devoted to something, or too close and too attached to something, it would not blind us. And that is why, or even when we meditate, sometimes the meditation feeling is so good. People so get caught up by the nice feeling, but they miss that knowledge of why the nice feeling is there, what causes the nice feeling. Is the nice feeling an illusion? Is it a transitory, a temporary feeling that gives us that what we call shock scenery? So one needs to, whatever one experiences, whatever thoughts that passes through our mind, Our intellect must leverage on those thoughts generated by the mind, like an electron microscope that pierces through the thoughts and asks, why is this thought here? Why are you here? What is the purpose of these thoughts? If it's to give happiness, why this happiness, and how long this happiness, or why this sadness, and how long this is, and how do I transcend both the sukha and dukkha? And this slowly, as you have those kind of mindset that is really sharp and penetrating like electron microscope, every thought is seen with that lens, and it just goes in and deciphers and understands why it is, and you see that that thought will just dissolve. And that is the point that we see that knowledge becomes very clear. You remove all these transitory things, all these fleeting things, all these impermanent things, and what is left through this process is the clear knowledge. That's what jnana is, that's what wisdom is. When that happens, you don't get caught up by all these illusionaries, things that appear and disappear. You see that the jnana then says, look, is able to sift out what is real and unreal. It attains this state of viveka, ability to discriminate between what is real and unreal, what is permanent and impermanent, what is transitory and more permanent and eternal, what is timeless and time bound, what is mortal and what is immortal. So the mind gets that clarity of thought. So Mahan always says in Tamil, Arivin, Arival, Arivin, Telivu. Telivu is actually clarity of thought. Telividam, Telivai, Tenda Jnanam. So through that experiential learning and being aware of it, one acquires jnana, that wisdom. Right? And he says that jnaname unarve ungalin arivu. He says, this jnana, that wisdom, knowledge, nothing but the cosmic intelligence that is reverberating in you. So when you decipher all these things, ultimately you come to the truth. And the truth is essentially what that substratum that we call that formless, dimensionless, because everything else is, formed and some kind of a material experience. When you remove all that, all you are sitting with is nothing, no thing, absence of materiality. And that's the true state. So, but how to get there? There are various practices that one needs to do. So the key thing of this message is that Swamiji says that open your eyes to God's vision. It's not external, but internal, right? So it's, scientists have developed the telescope to see the far distance galaxies, to see the light in, billions of light years, to be able to map out the nebula and the galaxies and all those things. That telescope came from the human mind to see the light that is in distant planets. The same human mind is able to create electron microscope to see the most minutest thing. The mind that can, give you vision of these macro, the few big things, including the beginning of the universe. The same mind enables us to see the microcosm. So the mind that gives us vision of the macrocosm and microcosm, that same tools of inquiry that comes from the human mind, has also another important tool, the mind itself, which is an inner scope that is able to land the mind. That's how we have landed, knowledge and intellect on the moon and the stars and the sun, including the beginning of the universe, and our knowledge to the most microcosm, the smallest of the minutest, particles and quarks. The same human mind can land on itself into its divine substratum, the soul substratum, or the big I substratum. It requires, the intensity of how an astrophysicist or astronomer looks at the sky, and the micro, scientist that is looking at microcosm. It requires even more intensity in, observing that inner self. So open your eyes, here the inner eyes that Swamiji speaks about, the third eye and the crest eye, and all these inner eyes to be able to cognize that vision. One will only be able to cognize divinity in its entirety if the inner eyes are wide awake and the external eyes are asleep. So here comes the final slide, which I started off with, and this comes from the Corinthians, the Christian theology, and you can find this in all the other scriptures in theology, including Mahan's teachings. So here he says that fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. And here the unseen gives life to all the seen. Right? For what is seen is temporary, as I explained earlier, but what is unseen is eternal. So every day when we focus our eyes to that inner realm, we see that we understand that which is powering us and that which is powering the entire universe. And we start getting glimpses of that divinity, glimpses of that God, or the glimpses of the self. We experience it, that universality, that spirituality, all those things. And one would expect, well, I meditate and do all this, how come I don't experience or don't, heaven is not, descending upon me? Well, we're looking at the wrong things. There's no external heaven. In our next few classes, I'll take you through what is it that we cognize when we observe the unseen in us. Can we cognize that unseen? And what happens when we can cognize the unseen? The mind and the intellect just raises a notch to be able to express this unseen in words, in languages, in poetries, in the mathematics, because only an enlightened person would be able to describe all this. Otherwise, it's just a merely theoretical experience, or, which is. So here in Mahan's book, he actually articulates what he's experiencing, these glimpses of that self or the God or the divinity or that, substratum, which is, we call God, Brahman, we call it many, many names. But it all starts with being able to be focused and to attain that silence in that mind, that quietude, the serenity, and the beautiful, sound of silence. Only in that silence one would be able to experience that substratum that we call God. And when we do that, you see that our mind becomes more, peaceful, more calm, more cool. A sense of clarity comes up, or bandwidth goes up to be able to understand this God realization state. We see that for most people whose mind is so busy and noisy, even if the divinity stands right in front of you, you will not cognize it. Even if the divinity is present in you, you will not cognize it. So only in that quietude of the mind, one will get glimpses in the beginning of this divinity. And you'll be able to, over time, describe what these experiences are. And ultimately, you see that every moment becomes this divine connected moment. And this is what this great Mahan has left us. Sandosham. Next class, I will speak about more describing this vision and the experience of what Mahan's, perspective of God and how you can experience it too. Thank you, Sandosham.